Okay, there you go.
Okay, everybody in? Hey, everybody. Welcome to this 39th webinar on the secret teachings of all ages by Manly P. Hall. I want to give a shout out to Howard Carter, who discovered the tomb of the pharaoh Tutankhamun 100 years ago, just a couple of days ago. On Friday, it was the 100th year anniversary of his discovery of this amazing tomb. Okay, this webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moorian Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress as shown here. Previous episodes of this, the Secret Doctrine, and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You can register for any of these webinars on the home page, upper left corner here, of MoorianFederation.com. Okay, we have just a few more paragraphs in this subsection, Pymander, the vision of Hermes, which is the final part of a chapter dedicated to Hermes Trismegistus. So a quick recap. It's been quite a ride over, I think, four webinars. This is, I think, the fifth on this topic, the vision of Pymander. So after wandering in the desert, Hermes went into a deep meditation, during which he beheld the figure of a great dragon who announced itself to be Pymander, the mind of the universe. Pymander then revealed to Hermes a series of visions focused on the power of the word. The union of the word and the mind, Pymander said, produces that mystery which is called life. This was followed by a revelation of the forming of the universe by the supreme mind, working through, quote, another mind called the workman, the master builder, or the maker of things. The second mind is the solar logos. Then the supreme mind fashioned a, quote, glorious universal glorious universal man in its own image, the Manu, or Adam Kadmon, who, peering down into the shadows of the lower subplanes, found and fell in love with the reflection of himself. Then, quote, the intelligent thing united itself with the unreasoning image or shape. That is, the soul united with animal man. And in so doing, made possible the return path to what Pymander calls the sky man, which is the monad. Then Pymander revealed the path of light and life, quote, and man received the life and light of the great dragon, and of the life was made his soul, and of the light his mind. When Hermes asked why men should be deprived of immortality for the sin of ignorance alone, the great dragon answered, to the ignorant, the body is supreme, and they are incapable of realizing the immortality that is within them, knowing only the body which is subject to death. They believe in death because they worship that substance which is the cause and reality of death. This is a reference to the long phase of personality development called in Theosophy the halls of ignorance. Next came a teaching on the eighth sphere, the sphere of the fixed stars, beyond the influence of the planets, to which the righteous soul ascends. In theosophical speak, that would be one who has broken the chains of samsara and is no longer needs to incarnate. But since many are unable to reach this high abode, Pymander exhort Hermes to, quote, go forth to become as a guide to those who wander in darkness, that all men within whom dwells, and I love this, who dwells the spirit of my mind, the universal mind, may be saved by my mind in you, which shall call forth my mind in them. One of the most memorable quotes from this section. And this is where we left off. Could we get a reader to finish the paragraph?
Establish my mysteries, and they shall not fail from the earth. For I am the mind of the mysteries, and until mind fails, which is never, my mysteries cannot fail. With these parting words, Pymander, radiant with celestial light, vanished, mingling with the powers of the heavens. Raising his eyes unto the heavens, Hermes blessed the Father of all things and consecrated his life to the service of the great light.
Thank you, BL. Okay, I'm in my place here. So in this statement, Pymander uses the term mysteries, an idea especially popular in the ancient world. My mysteries, establish my mysteries, right? It describes both the doctrine and the school by which an acolyte might come to know the mind of Pymander, or universal mind. In the final paragraph, Pymander returns to his heavenly abode, and Hermes, quote, consecrates his life to the service of the great light. So, since Pymander exhorts Hermes to establish his mysteries, let's take a few minutes to review this concept, which we spent many months studying earlier in this series. So could we get a reader, please, for this first quote?
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Did you say Karen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Mysteries, from Greek mysteria, applies chiefly to Greece, but once extended to Asiatic cults of religio-philosophical character, it acquired a wider range under the Romans and is used in the secret doctrine in reference to equivalent institutions in any part of the world. The most celebrated in Greece were those of Eleusis, pertaining to Demeter and Persephone, which gave rise to many branches and influenced schools of older foundation. Others were those of Samothrace and Orphic mysteries and the festivals devoted to Dionysus. Schools like that of Pythagoras spread their influence, as did academies such as that of Plato. The history of Greece furnishes notable examples of great men who had been initiated into such mysteries. The mysteries came into Greece from India and Egypt, and their origin goes back to Atlantean times. They were, in historic times, the means whereby man's divine ancestors communicated truths concerning the mysteries of cosmos and of human nature and of the communion between divinity and man.
Thank you, Karen. And next reader.
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
The last paragraph there, the elevating and unifying influence. Did I have that right?
What are you asking?
Am I picking it up at the top of the second column? Okay, never at the beginning. No. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a whole new reading.
Thank you very much. The mysteries were divided into the greater and lesser, inner and outer, esoteric and partly exoteric. And as the former were guarded by well-observed secrecy, the sources of ordinary information are mostly based on the latter. The more recondite mysteries could not, from their very nature, be publicly divulged. They were revelations, appreciable only by an awakened spiritual perception and incommunicable to anyone not thus awakened. The greater mysteries were successive initiations for prepared initiates. The lesser consisted of symbolic and dramatic representations for the public, in which, among other things, the profound symbology of the Greek mythology was employed. The elevating and unifying influence of these institutions was acknowledged by Greek and Roman authorities and is apparent from a study of Greek history. With the advance of a cycle of materialism, the mysteries became degraded, especially in Asia Minor in Roman times. The symbolism was perverted and even made to palliate licentious practices. What little was left to abolish was formerly abolished by Justinian, who closed the mystic and quasi-esoteric Neoplatonic school of Athens in 529.
Thank you, Martha. And next.
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
At formal institutions, the mysteries had their earliest origin during the fourth root race, Atlantis, after its fourth subrace. Indeed, the still more primitive roots of the mysteries can be traced to a much earlier time, probably during the third subrace of the Atlanteans, when the rapid degeneration of mankind into the worship of matter had brought about the absolute need of segregating the nobler and finer spirits of the human race into groups or schools where they could, under the vows of inviolable secrecy, study the deeper mysteries of nature and their own oneness with the divine. From that time, the mysteries became, with every subrace, more and more secret, and entrance into them became ever more difficult.
Thank you, Vivian. And finally, one more.
Scott, can you read that, please?
After the fifth root race came upon the scene, the mysteries had become well established in all countries of the globe, and their rites and functions, both of the greater and the less, were conducted as functions of the state. Even from the time of the incarnations of the Manapusatras, in the third root race, there has been an unbroken line, stream, or succession of lofty spiritual teachers guarding the ancient God wisdom received in primordial ages from the Dhyanis. And the mysteries, even in their heyday of splendor and in their most secret lines of work, were the outer side of clothing of this inner stream of inspiration and sublime teaching. The light has not yet died from off the earth, and the spiritual stream still exists and does its work in the world, although for ages it has been acting more secretly and esoterically than ever. However, the time is coming when the mysteries will again be reestablished and will receive the common reverence and respect from mankind that in former ages they universally had.
Thank you, Scott. So I love this line, this inner secret line of work was the outer clothing of the inner stream of inspiration. That really sums up the idea of the mysteries really nicely. Okay, any thoughts or questions about this topic, about this subject matter? If you have any questions during the webinar, just raise your hand and we'll get to it. All right, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Greg, can you read that, please?
Yes. Thus preached Hermes, O people of the earth, men born and made of the elements, But with the spirit of the divine man within you, rise from your sleep of ignorance. Be sober and thoughtful. Realize that your home is not in the earth, but in the light. Why have you delivered yourselves over unto death, having power to partake of immortality? Repent and change your minds. Depart from the dark light and forsake corruption forever. Prepare yourselves to climb through the 7 rings and to blend your souls with the eternal light.
Thank you, Greg. So this passage sounds like it was, this first part of this, like it was written by an early church father. And remember, this was sort of resurrected sometime in the 1st and 2nd century by these early church fathers. And sometimes you really hear that coming through. But then we have this interesting departure from the expected, which is repent and change your minds. Repent means turn back, in this case, to one's source or soul, thus suggesting the embracing of illumined or higher mind over the lower mind. Change your minds. This is strengthened by the next command: depart from the dark light and forsake corruption forever. What better description of lower mind than the dark light? Though in theosophy, this term is usually applied to the light inherent in matter, it seems to me very apropos for the lower mind. And finally, prepare yourselves to climb through the 7 rings and to blend your souls with the eternal light. The now familiar 7 rings are the 7 crystalline planetary spheres, each associated with their own personality, glamours, and illusions. When the deceased, or in this case the initiate, passes through the final gates of Saturn, he or she moves beyond the ring past knot of manifestation and is truly liberated. Note the Ouroboros here called Leviathan, marking the border between the planets and the constellations. Next up, can we get a reader?
Yeah, Eleonora, can you read that for us, please? Okay, I don't see her coming to the forefront. So Tia, can you read that?
No,
Oh,
sorry.
there, we got her, we got her.
I had a hard time with my mouse for some reason. And in any effect, here we go. Some who heard mocked and scoffed and went their way, delivering themselves to the second death from which there is no salvation. But others, casting themselves before the feet of Hermes, besought him to teach them the way of life. He lifted them gently, receiving no approbation for himself, and staff in hand, went forth teaching and guiding mankind, and showing them how they might be saved. In the worlds of men, Hermes sowed the seeds of wisdom and nourished the seeds with the immortal waters. And at last came the evening of his life, and as the brightness of the light of earth was beginning to go down, Hermes commanded his disciples to preserve his doctrines, inviolate throughout all ages. The vision of Pymander he committed to writing, that all men desiring immortality might therefore find the way.
Thank you, Eleonora. Okay, first up, some who heard mocked and scoffed and went their way, delivering themselves to the second death from which there is no salvation. This is very severe. More likely, those who turn from the upward path are just simply not ready, are still gathering experience in the halls of ignorance, then after many thousands of lives will return on to the lighted way. Though, as with Judas, there is something particularly damning about directly shunning an avatar of light. A tiny few do choose the true second death, which in Theosophy describes as the permanent snapping of that thread which connects us to our soul, followed by entrance into the eighth sphere, which is the opposite of the eighth sphere described by Hermes and is tangential to the lower mind rather than beneath the physical plane. This sentence closely parallels the lives of other teaching avatars like the Buddha and the Christ, each with their own doctrine as to the way of life, right? I love the phrase, he lifted them gently, receiving no approbation for himself. It's the hallmark of service. Next, in the worlds of men, Hermes sowed the seeds of wisdom and nourished the seeds with the immortal waters. Earlier in the text, these waters are described as the waters of light. In the ageless wisdom, these waters, called in Sanskrit Amrita, are the waters held in the Aquarian vessel, quote, poured forth for thirsty men. In this sentence, Hermes commands his disciples to, quote, preserve his doctrine inviolate throughout all ages. Some interpret this to mean that the 42 books of Hermes were secreted in a desert cavern somewhere, and they may have been. But the only way to preserve such doctrines, quote, throughout the ages, is to oneself become a living embodiment of the ageless wisdom, and then through successive incarnations, guide others onto the path. Finally, the vision of Pymander, he committed to writing that all men desiring immortality might therein find the way. And it seems to have survived, at least in part, as an extraordinarily inspirational revelation. And to my mind, amazingly theosophical, even in many of its particulars, though I think this version has been laced with a stylistically Old Testament slant. Okay, next up. Reader, please.
Yeah, can you read that for us, please?
Sure, but can I just submit my question first?
Please.
I think I put enter. Okay, there it is. And I'll mute myself because so you won't have to go back, Francis. It's just, could you just expound a little bit more on the theosophical definition of the second death, particularly when you got to the part where you were talking about tangential to the lower mind and beneath the physical plane, and you showed us that, yeah, there.
Yeah, well, the eighth sphere is described as a condition that one enters into, usually through the Black Lodge, where you orient yourself towards materiality and absolutely deny any connection with spirit or with soul for many successive lifetimes. Until the link or the thread that binds us to our souls is completely de-energized and snaps. And as a result, we don't have a soul, or those people who, very few, who undergo this horrible reality, drift into ever denser manifestation, finally entering what's called the eighth sphere, which is not like an eighth subplane beneath the physical plane, but is in fact a condition of consciousness wherein one dwells until the end of the Manvantara. Now, just where that end is it a solar Manvantara, and you get to reset at that point and restart at who knows what stage, Or if it's the entire universal Manvantara, then you're literally reabsorbed into the substance aspect and have to completely redefine yourself from scratch. It's, he doesn't give specific details about just how the condition manifests beyond entering the eighth sphere. But, when you talk about a fate worse than death, this is the ultimate negative condition. But he also says in his teachings, in case you're wondering if you're a candidate for this, any of you, that if you give any thought to the soul, any aspiration whatsoever, that re-energizes the link, right? I think it's mostly entered through the Dark Lodge and basically orienting oneself and aligning oneself with the Dark Lords, who are form-based beings, and they develop, we're told, prodigious abilities in lower mind. But in order to do that, they completely cut themselves off from the higher, and the single characteristic that is most defining of this condition is the complete lack of love and compassion. They develop the will, they develop the intellect, but there is no love. Does that answer your question?
Very much so. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's see. Where were we?
Next page, I think.
Yeah, next page. So we were just about to get a reader for this, right?
Yes, and it's going to be Tia.
Great.
In concluding his exposition of the vision, Hermes wrote, "The sleep of the body is the sober watchfulness of the mind, and the shutting of my eyes reveals the true light. My silence is filled with budding life and hope, and is full of good. My words are the blossoms of fruit of the tree of my soul. For this is the faithful account of what I received from my true mind. That is Pomander, the great dragon, the Lord of the world, through whom I became inspired by God with the truth. Since that day, my mind has been ever with me, and in my soul it hath given birth to the word. The word is reason, and reason hath redeemed me, from which cause with all my soul and all my strength, I give praise and blessing unto God the Father, the life and the light and the eternal good."
Thank you, Tia. Okay, first up, in concluding his exposition of the vision of Pymander's, Hermes wrote, "The sleep of the body is the sober watchfulness of the mind, and the shutting of my eyes reveals the true light." Hermes is, of course, not talking about literal sleep. The sleep of the body, that is the quieting of the form aspect and re-identification with the soul, is more easily done through regular meditation. And the shutting of the eyes, of course, refers to cutting out the orientation towards sensory perception, in this case, vision, and turning to the inner vision. Hermes' emphasis on stilling the body, it's a little weird, but reminds me of the Blind Faith lyrics from Can't Find My Way Home. You have to be at least 60 to know what I'm talking about. Quote, "Come down on your own and leave your body alone. Somebody must change." All right. Anybody want me to sing it? No, just kidding. Next. My silence is filled with budding life and hope, and is full of good. My words are the blossoms of fruit of the tree of my soul. You just want to read that over and over. This is the first time that Hermes describes the effect of his vision on himself. Who could wish for more than to have one's silence filled with budding life, hopes, and goodness? He has obviously become soul infused. Next, for this is the faithful account of what I received from my true mind, that is Pymander, the great dragon, the Lord of the Word, through whom I became inspired by God with the truth. I love the phrase, what I received from my true mind. It's so immediate, not God told me this, so listen up. And also the phrase, Lord of the Word takes us to the previous, my words are the blossom of fruit of the trees of my soul. Is so immediate. As mentioned before, the Word is viewed as the feminine vehicle of the Logos itself, and along with mind, is the primary focus of this entire vision. Word and mind. Next, since that day, my mind, capital M, has ever been with me, and in my own soul it hath given birth to the Word. The Word is reason, and reason hath redeemed me. This term, my mind, with the capital M, so simply describes Hermes' infused identification with Pymander. And in that identification, his intuition has come to life, giving him direct access to reason by means of the spoken and unspoken word, which is, after all, an extension of the vibration of Godhead. DK tells us the following about reason. Could we get a reader, please?
Christopher, can you read that for us, please? I can't hear you. I see you're unmuted.
You might have a mute button on, physical mute button on your microphone itself that you need to click off. Sometimes that creates a difficulty. Well, let's go to somebody else and then we'll come back to you, Christopher.
Okay. Anne, can you read that for us, please?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When the disciple has striven to expand his consciousness, when he has learnt to stabilize his consciousness in the spiritual triad, then he becomes part of a great and constant hierarchical effort which strives upwards towards the place of clear electric light, to which the clear cold light of the reason, pure perception of truth, is the first key to the first door into Shambhala. Rays and Initiations, page 139.
Don't you love it? So, this gives the fifth ray occult definition to this beautiful devotional description given us by Hermes, right? This idea of the access to reason. And here we discover that reason to which he speaks of, it's not it's not, hey, be reasonable. It's a much higher version of that, even though it's linked. It's this pure perception of truth, right? Yeah, very beautiful. Okay. Yeah, Scott.
Scott's got his hand up.
Okay.
Yeah. I recall when he's talking about pure reason, that is true love. The association, reason and Venus and love. And
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
the second ray aspect there, and then an expression.
Yeah, it's a Buddhic quality, which is the plane of union, the goal of humanity, and which is ultimately to become one with the second principle, which is this quality of reason and love. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for making it clear again. Anyone else? There's some wonderful stuff here that we could linger on. If you have ideas or questions. And that brings us to the conclusion. Finally, a preamble to Hermes' final words of dedication. Quote, "For which cause with all my soul and all my strength I give praise and blessing unto God the Father, the life and the light, and the eternal good." Next, the last lines of Hermes' vision is a prayer to Pymander, which, in order to preserve its continuity, we'll read straight through without comment, and then we'll discuss it afterwards. So could we get a reader for this? This is half of it.
Mary, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, I can. Holy is God, the Father of all things, the one who is before the first beginning. Holy is God, whose will is performed and accomplished by his own powers, which he gave, given birth to out of himself. Holy is God, who has determined that he shall be known, and who is known by his own, to whom he reveals himself. Holy art thou, who by thy word, reason, hast established all things. Holy art thou, of whom all nature is the image. Holy art thou, whom the inferior nature has not formed. Holy art thou, who art stronger than our powers. Holy art thou, who art greater than all excellency. Holy art thou, who art better than all praise.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And another reader for this, please.
Regine, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Accept these reasonable sacrifices from a pure soul and a heart stretched out unto thee. O thou unspeakable, unutterable, to be praised with silence. I beseech thee to look mercifully upon me, that I may not err from the knowledge of thee, and that I may enlighten those that are in ignorance, my brothers and thy sons. Therefore, I believe thee and bear witness unto thee, and depart in peace and in truthfulness into thy light and life. Blessed art thou, O Father, the man thou hast fashioned would be sanctified with thee, as thou hast given him power to sanctify others with thy word and thy truth.
Thank you. Okay, chapter ends with a cursory summary. Can we get a reader?
The vision of Hermes, like nearly all of the Hermetic writing, is an allegorical exposition of great philosophic and mystic truths, and its hidden meaning may be comprehended only by those who have been raised into the presence of the true mind.
Thank you, Biel. So, any thoughts or questions on anything related to Hermes' vision? That takes us back over the last 3 pages in this entire vision. Okay. With this prayer, we finish MPH's chapter on the life and writings of Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. And when we turn the page in the folio edition, we come to a chapter entitled The Initiation of the Pyramid. But the plate that appears opposite takes us all the way back to the section on Atlantis. Could we get a reader for the text beneath the plate as shown here?
Okay. I was going to say, nobody's going to be able to read that. Karen, he made it bigger for you. Can you read it now, please?
Well, I'll try. Okay, an idealistic depiction of the Atlantean mystery temple. In the Critias, Plato describes in detail the divine foundation of the Atlantean Empire, originally known as Poseidonus. Poseidonus, is that right?
Yeah, or Poseidonus,
Poseidonus.
I don't know.
The Golden Age preserved in myth and legend When the Gods Walked with Men depicts the zenith of Atlantean civilization. The demigods of the ancient world were the Atlanteans, to whom every civilized nation owes an incalculable debt of gratitude. In the British Museum, there is a remarkable document which is known as the Toronto manuscript, which was written over 3,500 years ago by the Mayas of Yucatan, containing an authentic account of the cataclysm which sank the continent of Atlantis. This priceless document contains the following statement according to the translation by Li Plongeon. In the year of 6th Khan, on the 11th Moloch in the month of Zak, there occurred terrible earthquakes, which continued without interruption until the 13th Chuan.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. First up, in the Critias, Plato describes in detail the divine foundations of the Atlantean Empire, originally known as Poseidonus. The dialogues, Critias and Timaeus, which are almost always found together, published together, describe not only the foundations of Atlantis, but also its war with the Athenians and Atlantis's final destruction. If you're interested in Atlantis, we studied this subject in the Secret Teachings webinars 22 through 26, which you can find on Makara and YouTube. We got into it in some depth. Poseidonus has been illustrated many times and can even be found in a walkthrough 3D software. Of course, none of these images are particularly accurate, but they do stimulate the imagination. Actually, this image was a recreation from the writings of Plato, who gave the dimensions of these various rings. Of course, nothing you find in the rings are accurate, but we have some sense just from this aerial view of what Poseidonus may have looked like. I saw a hand go up.
Yeah, Greg's got his hand up. You want to go ahead, Greg?
Yeah. This is also a depiction that they often use for Teotihuacan or Mexico City afterwards, but yeah, Ciudad de Mexico. But it's still because Mexico City was originally started like this, and then it shifted. But anyway, it's an interesting depiction for sure.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, go back. I don't think you were in the webinars yet. Check out the webinars 22 through 26. And it's some really interesting stuff about how this was mathematically created.
Yeah, definitely. I will. It sounds good. So webinars 22 to 26.
Yeah.
In Secret Teachings?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, this series.
I'll make a note for you.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
Great. Okay. Next up, the Golden Age preserved in myth and legend, when the gods walked with men, depicts the zenith of Atlantean civilization. This Golden Age was millions of years before Atlantis' final destruction. We tend to think in terms of just the last few hundred years and even the last decades, but it was a root race. It housed a root race, and so the Golden Age was happened in whole subraces before that last subrace where Atlantis was destroyed. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Martha, can you read that for us, please?
All that the modern processes of civilization have made possible, and much more than that which today comes under the name of scientific discovery, were known in old Atlantis. but they were not developed by men themselves, but given to them as a free gift. Much as people today give to a child beautiful and wonderful things, which the child uses and enjoys, but which he does not understand in any way. Great and beautiful cities, full of temples and great buildings, of which the Chaldean and Babylonian remains are the degenerate remnants, and the modern skyscraper, the child, and the modern skyscraper, the child, were everywhere to be found. Most of our modern scientific knowledge was possessed by these priest kings and constituted in the eyes of the masses a form of wonderful magic, externalization of the hierarchy. Francis, I have a question.
Yeah.
When we read this, are these kings that he's describing in the earlier periods, were they equivalent to the masters, or were they more like channels through which the information was coming?
Well, DK tells us that the hierarchy actually incarnated in order to govern this great root race, right? That's why it's part of this book, Externalization of the Hierarchy. That's why he includes this material in that book. It was the previous externalization of the hierarchy, right? So the great priests, the great kings were initiates from another time, another era, probably mostly moon chain would be my guess, where they, gained initiation. I think the Christ is said to have taken the third initiation in Atlantean times, and he's the most. He was the fastest moving of all human beings to take initiation, to take individualization in Lemuria. And so, so all the great ones would have been from a much earlier stages of humanity, overseeing these. And of course, they were naturally psychically empowered because they had not yet developed lower mind. They were astrally polarized. I'm talking about the Atlanteans in general, not the high initiates. And so you would have had those who could attune to the hierarchy, but as we know, it all went south at the end, and the dark powers engulfed the physical plane, Atlantis, and so the plug had to be pulled sort of midway through this series of sub races. Anyone else? All this we described, including more quotes from this part of externalization of the hierarchy, in those webinars 22 through 26, if you're interested. This is just a kind of representation. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Tia's got her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to track back. So the basic Atlantean would be able to contact hierarchy, you said, because they hadn't really developed the lower concrete mind. So are you saying that they had direct access from their Atlantic polarization to the higher mind, or did they bypass that altogether? How did that actually functionally work?
Well, it's pretty hard for us to conceive.
Yeah.
Because without the development of lower mind, they wouldn't have been able to contact them via thought. It would have been that through the astral, that connection between the sixth and the fourth subplanes, right? The astral and the Buddhic plane, which naturally exists. There's a resonance between those two planes. So almost certainly that would be the means of contact, which would be sensitivity to impression and sensitivity to different forms of energy would have allowed them to feel the connection with those higher beings.
It's just interesting because the way we're taught, you know, how it moves through the Antakarana and then
Yeah.
up through, and then, you know, the masters actually contacting the soul. So they on the higher mental plane. So they bypassed all of that and just got impressions directly from the Buddhic plane.
You know, it's a guess because
Yeah.
DK doesn't unpack that. You know, he doesn't give us the blow by blow of how they were able to contact hierarchy. But given what we know about them, you know, we could surmise that it would have been through the higher aspirational astral, the higher subplanes of the astral plane, where aspiration is developed, and it would have been through that. And of course, there would have been the hierarchy working from the other end to impress on those higher astral subplanes the sensitivity of the best of the race, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Of course, you know, but it also points to the fact that lower mind can act as an enormous block. You know, that's why we say in the Great Invocation, restore the plan on earth, because our lower, the fact of the development of lower mind in the Aryan root race has acted as a block to our connection with hierarchy. And, you know, all serving the purpose of reconnecting consciously, you know, through the building of the Antakarana. But that's a very, very different process than was employed in Atlantean times, for sure. Okay, anyone else? Okay, next up, in the British Museum, there's a remarkable document known as the Troano manuscript, which was written over 3,500 years ago by the Mayas of Yucatan, containing an authentic account of the cataclysm which sank the continent of Atlantis. So here's a sample page from the Troano. And if we could get a reader, actually the same reader will read 2 pages because they're short.
Scott, can you read those, please?
I can try. This manuscript was found about the year 1886 at Madrid, Spain, by the Abbé Brasseur de Bourbourg, while on a visit to the library of the Royal Historical Academy. Names by him manuscript Troano in honor of its possessor, Don Juan de Troy or Tolano.
Go ahead.
The original is written on a strip of maguey paper about 14 feet long and 9 inches wide, the surface of which is covered with a white paint or varnish on which the characters and figures are painted in black, red, blue, and brown. It is folded fan-like into 35 folds, presenting, when these are pressed together, the appearance of an ordinary octavo volume.
Thank you. You know, this is one of the reasons I love this series. Is, you know, I uncover stuff like this that you just may never find out about, you know. And it's an amazing thing that this still exists and is now truly preserved, you know. And it literally gives a, you know, an account of the cataclysm of Atlantis. It's really remarkable to me. Okay. Next, this priceless document contains the following statement, according to the translation by Le Plongeon. In the year 6 Khan, on the 11th Mulak, in the month Zak, there occurred terrible earthquakes, which continued without interruption until the 13th Chuan. Sounds like a children's book, doesn't it? But when you get into it, you realize all these Mayan words were very specific. Ironically, Khan is the Mayan, shown here, is the Mayan year of harvest and wealth, you know. More appropriately, Mulak is associated with water. Zak is the 11th of 19 Mayan months and runs from February 27th to March 17th. The meaning of the glyph associated with this month, Zak, is healing with raised hands and the rays of the sun. The day Chuan is associated with a monkey, a Mayan symbol for joining the past, present, and future, which I found particularly appropriate, that was the day ascribed to the submergence of Atlantis, the joining of the past, present, and future. So, there's way more here than we could possibly get into, but you get just some taste of these Mayan hieroglyphs and the meanings of these different symbols for the months, days, etc. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
The country of the hills of Mud, the land of Mu, was sacrificed. Being twice upheaved, it suddenly disappeared during one night, the basin being continually shaken by volcanic forces. Being confined, these caused the land to sink and to rise several times and in various places. At last the surface gave away, and 10 countries were torn asunder and scattered. Unable to stand the force of the convulsions, they sank with their 64
million.
Thank you, inhabitants. Before the Atlantean continent was submerged, the initiates of the Atlantean mysteries, carrying with them the secret doctrines entrusted to their keeping, immigrated into Egypt and other parts of the earth, where they would be safe from the impending catastrophe. Thus their secret teaching, with its priceless value to subsequent ages, was preserved. They established centers of learning and promulgated the code, clothed in the language of symbolism, to such as they deemed worthy to receive it.
Thank you, Vivian. Okay. First, the country of the hills of Mud, the land of Mu, was sacrificed. Being twice upheaved, it suddenly disappeared during one night, the basin being continually shaken by volcanic forces. Remember, this is a quote from this this manuscript that we just looked at. This is a translation from part of this. So the word Mu means both mother and water, and is sometimes used as another name for Atlantis, but more correctly as the name of the much older continent of Lemuria, right? In his book, The Lost Continent of Mu, James Churchward calls it the motherland of man. Note that Churchward places Mu in the Pacific, so do some other authors, rather than the Atlantic Ocean. Can we get a reader for this quote from the Secret Doctrine, detailing the times associated with these two submergences?
Greg, can you read that for us, please?
But if one believes in the final submersion of Atlantis 850,000 years ago, as taught in esoteric Buddhism, the gradual first sinking having begun during the Eocene age, one has to accept the statement for the so-called Lemuria, the continent of the third root race, first nearly destroyed by combustion and then submerged. This is what the commentary says. The first earth having been purified by the 49 fires, her people born of fire and water could not die, etc. The second earth with its race disappeared as vapor vanishes in the air. The third earth had everything consumed on it after the separation and went down into the lower deep, the ocean. This was twice 82 cyclic years ago. Now a cyclic year is what we call a sidereal year, and is founded on the precession of the equinoxes, or 25,868 years each, and this is equal, therefore, in all to 4,242,352 years.
Thank you, Greg. Okay. Any questions about this? Next, a description of the submerging of Atlantis. The exact figure of 64 million inhabitants is unique to the Troana manuscript. Extrapolating from the figures given by Plato for the number of soldiers in the Atlantean armed forces, Otto Muck, who was writing in the 1970s, puts the population of Atlantis at the time of its destruction at between 20 and 40 million. Others put the number far higher. Next, before the Atlantean continent was submerged, the initiates of the Atlantean mysteries, carrying with them the secret doctrines entrusted to their keeping, immigrated into Egypt and other parts of the earth, where they would be safe from impending catastrophe. An old commentary cited in Externalization of the Hierarchy describes this transition. Could we get a reader, please?
Eleonora, can you read that for us, please?
Sure can. Like as the dragon snake uncoils slowly its body, so the sons of men, led on by the sons of wisdom, opened their folds and spreading out like a running stream of sweet waters. Many of the faint-hearted among them perished on their way, but most were saved. This nucleus which was saved formed the basis of our present root race, the Aryan. The whole theme of the Old Testament is built around the development and growth of this nucleus. Symbolically speaking, the inhabitants of the ark and their descendants and the Jewish race stand for the salvaged remnant of humanity, salvaged in spite of themselves in face of the stupendous difficulties by the Great White Lodge.
Thank you. That was Eleanor, wasn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Next, thus their secret teaching, with its priceless value to subsequent ages, was preserved. They established centers of learning and promulgated the code, clothed in the language of symbolism, to such as they deemed worthy to receive it. So the second volume of The Secret Doctrine provides additional detail. Can we get a reader, please?
Tia, can you read that, please?
What was this nation? The secret doctrine teaches that it was the latest seventh subrace of the Atlanteans, already swallowed up in one of the early subraces of the Aryan stock, one that had been gradually spreading over the continent and its islands of Europe, as soon as they had begun to emerge from the seas. Descending from the high plateau of Asia, where the two races had sought refuge in the days of the agony of Atlantis, it had been slowly settling and colonizing the freshly emerged lands. This immigrant subrace had rapidly increased and multiplied on that virgin soil, had divided into many families, which in their turn divided into nations. Egypt and Greece, the Phoenicians, and the northern stocks had thus proceeded from that one subrace.
Thank you. Okay, that finishes our analysis of the text beneath J.A. Knapp's fanciful illustration, and with it, a brief review of the section in the Secret Teachings webinar series on Atlantis. Next up, we're beginning a new chapter here on page 41 in the folio edition called The Initiation of the Pyramid. So let's start with the first paragraph. Could we get a reader, please?
Anne, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Supreme among the wonders of antiquity, unrivaled by the achievements of later architects and builders, the Great Pyramid of Giza bears mute witness to an unknown civilization, which, having completed its predestined span, passed into oblivion. Eloquent in its silence, inspiring in its majesty, Divine in its simplicity, the Great Pyramid is indeed a sermon in stone. Its magnitude overwhelms the puny sensibilities of man. Among the shifting sands of time, it stands as a fitting emblem of eternity itself. Who were the illumined mathematicians who planned its parts and dimensions, the master craftsmen who supervised its construction, the skilled artisans who trued its blocks of stone?
Thank you, Anne. Okay, first, supreme among the wonders of antiquity, unrivaled by the achievements of later architects and builders. It's the only surviving wonder of the world, the 8 wonders of the world of the ancients. It's the only surviving one. Supreme is an apt adjective, not only because of the Great Pyramid's unequaled size, it covers 13 acres, and meticulous craftsmanship, but also because of its precise orientation and inherent symbolic geometry that was, according to Peter Tompkins' Secrets of the Great Pyramids, a hermetic geometry known only to a restricted group of initiates. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Mary, can you read that, please?
Sure. Whoever built the Great Pyramid, it is now quite clear, knew the precise circumference of the planet and the length of the year to several decimals, data which was not rediscovered until the 17th century. Its architects may well have known the main length of the Earth's orbit around the sun, the specific density of the planet, the 26,000-year cycle of the equinoxes, the acceleration of gravity, and the speed of light. Secrets of the Great Pyramids.
Thank you. Okay. Next, the Great Pyramid of Giza bears mute witness to an unknown civilization which, having completed its predestined span, passed into oblivion. Okay, unknown to modern archaeology, but as we just read in the Secret Doctrine, the early Egyptian builders of the Great Pyramids were probably a mixture of the surviving remnants of the Atlantean immigrants and the, quote, early subraces of the Aryan stock. Edgar Casey places the building of the pyramid at 10,600 BC, HPB at 78,000 BC. Tompkins, based on the alignment of the so-called ventilating channels with the stars, places its construction at over 60,000 BC. Next, MPH's paean to the Great Pyramid, having myself seen it on 3 occasions, twice climbed it and spent the night inside it, I can only agree that it is profoundly inspiring. It is a sermon written in the geometry of sacred proportion, and it is through this number and geometry that it is a fit symbol of that which is eternal. Next, who were the illumined mathematicians who planned its parts and dimensions? The master craftsmen who supervised its construction, the skilled artisans who trued its blocks of stone. The who and how is recorded in the Akashic records, all else is speculation, but there is no question that the architect was a master of wisdom, expressing himself on the 3rd, 5th, and 7th rays. One explanation for the perfect dimensions of the stones used in the building of the pyramid, some of them with a weight estimated at 80 tons, is that they were trued using sound rather than chisels, a directed sound. Hence the idea of initiate builders. Next up, can we get a reader?
Regine, can you read that for us, please? Maybe she stepped away. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
The earliest and best known account of the building of the Great Pyramid is that given by that highly revered but somewhat imaginative historian Herodotus.
Yes.
The pyramid was built in steps, battlement-wise, as it is called, or according to others, altar-wise. After laying the stones for the base, they raised the remaining stones to their places by means of machines formed of short wooden planks. The first machine raised them from the ground to the top of the first step. On this, there was another machine which received the stone upon its arrival and conveyed it to the second step, whence a third machine advanced it still higher. Either they had as many machines as there were steps in the pyramid, or possibly they had but a single machine, which being easily moved, was transferred from tier to tier as the stone rose. Both accounts are given, and therefore I mention both.
Okay, we'll continue this narrative before commenting. Just keep in mind that this is all the account given by Herodotus. It's not, quote, the truth of how it was done. It's just an idea that he put forth, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But anyway, let's finish his narrative.
The upper portion of the pyramid was finished first, then the middle, and finally the part which was lowest and nearest to the ground. There is an inscription in Egyptian characters on the pyramid, which records the quantity of radishes, onions, and garlic consumed by the laborers who constructed it. And I perfectly well remember that the interpreter who read the writing to me said that the money expended in this way was 1,600 talents of silver. If this then is a true record, what a vast sum must have been spent on the iron tools used in the work and on the feeding and clothing of the laborers, considering the length of time the work lasted, which has already been stated, 10 years, and the additional time, no small space, I imagine, which must have been occupied by the quarrying of the stones, their conveyance, and the formation of the underground apartments.
Thank you, Biel. Okay, there's no need to analyze Herodotus's statement on building methods, since it has been debunked by just about everyone, as described by MPH himself in the next paragraph. To get a sense of how questionable Herodotus's writings on this subject are, let's take a look at this quote from Thompson, who wrote The Mysteries of the Pyramid.
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
The only report on the daily cost of building the pyramid is given by Herodotus, who say that an interpreter told him the daily sum spent on radishes, onions, and garlic for the workmen was inscribed in Egyptian characters on the base of the pyramid. But the response sounds apocryphal, and as does one passed on by Herodotus, to the effect that Cheops became so broke during the operation that he prostituted his daughter by placing her in a chamber and charging each visitor the equivalent of a finished limestone block for her favors.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, we don't need to spend any more time with Herodotus's version of things. So let's continue. Can we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you please read that?
While the account is extremely colorful, it is apparent that the father of history, for reasons which he doubtless considered sufficient, concocted a fraudulent story to conceal the true origin and purpose of the Great Pyramid. This is but one of several instances in his writings, which would lead the thoughtful reader to suspect that Herodotus himself was an initiate of the sacred schools and consequently obligated to preserve inviolate the secrets of the ancient orders. The theory advanced by Herodotus and now generally accepted that the pyramid was the tomb of the pharaoh Cheops cannot be substantiated. In fact, Manetho, Eratosthenes, and Diodorus Siculus all differ from Herodotus, as well as from each other, regarding the name of the builder of this supreme edifice. The sepulchral vault, which, according to the Lepsius law of pyramid construction, should have been finished at the same time as the monument or sooner, was never completed.
Thank you, Martha. So the first sentence here, obviously, the ancients often created blinds to mislead the unready. And that's what MPH is suggesting happened here. So we'll start with the second sentence. This is but one of several instances in his writings which would lead the thoughtful reader to suspect that Herodotus himself was an initiate of the sacred schools and consequently obligated to preserve inviolate the secrets of the ancient orders, lead the merely curious away from the truth by concocting a more exoteric story. As I said, it was common in the ancient writings. Many books on this subject agree that Herodotus was initiated into the Egyptian readers. Could we get a reader for this?
Scott, can you read that, please?
The sufferings and death of Osiris were the great mystery of the Egyptian religion. His being the abstract idea of the divine goodness, his manifestation on earth, his death, his resurrection, and his subsequent office as judge of the dead in a future state look, says Wilkinson, like the earlier revelation of future manifestation of the deity converted into a mythological fable. In these mysteries, Herodotus, Plutarch, and Pythagoras were initiated, and the former two have given brief accounts of them.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and this is just one example of many quotes that include Herodotus as a likely initiate into the mysteries. Okay. Next, the theory advanced by Herodotus and now generally accepted that the pyramid was the tomb of the pharaoh of Cheops, or Khufu, cannot be substantiated. And let's read about that, if we could. Reader, please.
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
Pursuing Journard's theory that the king's chamber and its sarcophagus might have been designed not as a tomb, but to monumentalize a system of weights and measures, Taylor was amazed to find that the cubic capacity of the granite coffer was almost precisely 4 times what the British farmer still used as a standard measure for grain, the quarter, or 8 bushels. From his studies, Taylor concluded that the proportions of the pyramid had definitely been intended to incorporate geometric and astronomical laws, simply and easily expressed, and that its purpose has been to preserve and pass on this knowledge to future generations.
Thank you, Vivian. Yeah, any questions about this? It's really an extraordinary idea, right? To create this extraordinary, wonder of the ancient world, to monumentalize a system of weights and measures. Of course, my belief is it wasn't only that. I think it was a temple of initiation, but those initiations were helped by the fact that they were in this perfect symbol. They took place in this, you could call it a perfect symbol of sacred geometry. Okay, next, Manetho, Erasthenes, and Diodorus Siculus all differ from Herodotus as well as from each other regarding the name of the building of this supreme edifice. Well, actually, it was later discovered after MPH wrote this that Sufus, the name of the builder Manetho put forward, was the name Cheops in a different Egyptian dialect. So they concurred on the builder, which is to this day believed to be the builder by modern Egyptologists. Let's take these are all these names though, Manetho, Eratosthenes, and Diodorus Siculus. These are really important figures in connection with Egyptian history. So let's take a look. Manetho, an Egyptian priest, is remembered primarily for writing a history of the pharaonic dynasties called Egyptiaca. Could we get a reader including this caption?
Eleonora, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. The basis of the modern chronology of ancient Egypt rests on several literary sources. The most important is the writings of Manetho. Okay. He was an Egyptian priest, 305 to 285 BCE, who lived during the reigns of Ptolemy and the first, and how do you say it, Ptolemy? The second?
Ptolemy.
Ptolemy, drop the P, and was employed at the temple, oh my, thank you, in the Delta. He had knowledge of Egyptian hieroglyphs and Greek, and as a priest, access to original source material, including ancient records and king lists. He would also have been able to draw on his own personal experience of religious beliefs and practices and the rituals and festivals. He is created with 8 works. His most important, the
Egyptiaca.
History.
Egyptiaca. And that's illustrated up here, the Egyptiaca.
Okay. History of Egypt was written in the reign of Ptolemy II. In his book, he compiled a chronicle of the Egyptian kings from 3100 BC down to 343 BC, written in Greek and based on the original lists which the priest held in temples. This book remained the authentic source of Egypt's history for several centuries until it was lost, probably during the fire of the Library of Alexandria in c. 390 AD.
Thank you. Okay, so that's Manetho. Important by the fact that he recorded this list of kings. Eratosthenes, the second of the 3 that we're going to take a closer look at, who was the chief librarian at the Library of Alexandria, is best known for being the first person known to calculate the circumference of the earth, which he accomplished by measuring both the distance between the 2 Egyptian cities, Alexandria and Cyane, as well as the difference in angles of the shadows cast by the sun on a vertical rod in Alexandria and a well at Cyane at noon at the time of the summer solstice. It's really an extraordinary accomplishment that was lost for, let's see, when did he live? Well, at least a couple of thousand years before it was rediscovered. That the earth was not flat and that it was round. So the last of the 3 is Diodorus Siculus, who is known for his monumental Bibliotheca Historica, a universal history in 40 books, 15 of which have survived intact, written between 60 and 30 BC. He's known to have spent 3 years in Egypt, and a lot of knowledge of Egyptian way of life came to us through Diodorus Siculus. Okay, next up, the sepulchral vault, which according to the Lepsius law of pyramid construction, should have been finished at the same time as the monument, or sooner, was never completed. The quote unquote sepulchral vault was more commonly called the subterranean chamber, is the lowest of the Great Pyramid's 3 chambers. You see it down here, at 100 feet below the Earth's surface. Can we get a reader for this description?
Yeah, can you read that for us, please?
The subterranean chamber. This leads to a descending passageway, which is about 345 feet in length and slopes downward at an angle of 26 degrees, 31 feet, 23 inches, first through the superstructure of the pyramid and then down through the bedrock. The end of this passage levels off for 29 feet, has an unfinished niche, and then leads to a subterranean chamber. This curious chamber is only roughly hewn out of the bedrock and looks almost as though it is a quarry. In the south wall, opposite the entrance, is a blind passageway that runs for a distance of 16.15 meters, or 53 feet. It is possible that this passageway was originally intended to lead to a second subterranean chamber, the idea of which for some reason was abandoned. Along the east wall, halfway between the north and south walls, is a square cut shaft that has a depth of 15 feet.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about this? Very interesting. I crawled down there one night, and there's an unfinished pit that's inside this fence. It's been put up since I was there. That's about 20 feet deep, something like that, and then it's just rubble. At some point, you can see it up here. It's shown here in cutaway version. And they kept digging to see if maybe it had been filled up and led somewhere, but it didn't. It's considered unfinished. Lots of ideas about what this might have meant and why it was built, why it was unfinished. Some say it's like the base of the spine chakra of the pyramid. Anyway, so next up, I found no reference to the Lepsius law of pyramid construction, though I'm sure it can be found in one of Lepsius's many publications. Since I don't read German, I couldn't even do a search for it. Carl Richard Lepsius was a major influence on 19th century Egyptology, specializing in the translation of hieroglyphs, but he is best known for compiling an exhaustive list of pyramids. In fact, Lepsius led a team of workers that uncovered a total of 67 pyramids. Now, these are pyramids beyond those which were known at the time, like the ones on the Giza Plateau, right? 67 pyramids and 130 tombs. I mean, that's extraordinary. He also coined the term Egyptian Book of the Dead. Next up, can we get a reader, please?
Sure,
Yeah.
but you got a hand up.
Good.
Tia, go ahead.
I just need an explanation of one of the slides that you had, Francis. I think maybe 3 slides back when we were talking about the subterranean chamber. Up here in the upper right, it's kind of hard for me to make out what that is depicting. Could you just explain that a little bit for us? The one that seems, shadow or shaded.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what you see here is a vertical section of this. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Line.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, you enter here, and in the entrance to the pyramid is like right here. And you meet right here. The public is not allowed to go down here unless you pay off the guard to spend the night, and then you can make your way down there. It's pretty treacherous. It's only about 30 inches, 28 inches tall, and it's quite long, 345 feet to get down here. So what you see up here is the last part of this descending, probably cuts in right about here. Yeah, actually right about here, because you see this shaft going up, that's this shaft, which wasn't part of the original building of the pyramid. And so you're seeing from about here on down into the subterranean chamber. So this just gives a side view of it. And it's terrible. I could find no better map of this, so I can't even read these words, but in a way it doesn't matter that much. There's also an additional little passage that goes and just dead ends over here. I crawled down there. Quite freaky to do this, by the way. It's about 25 feet long, goes over there and then just stops, right? So that's what you're looking at. This part of it is sort of illustrated here. That's what it looks like down there with the lights on. Okay? All right, so let's
Good, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Oh, got ahead of myself. So this is where we are, right? Yeah. Can we get a reader, please?
Anne, can you read that, please?
Sure. There is no proof that the building was erected by the Egyptians, or the elaborate carvings with which the burial chambers of Egyptian royalty are almost invariably ornamented are entirely lacking, and it embodies none of the elements of their architecture or decoration, such as inscriptions, images, cartouches, paintings, and other distinctive features associated with dynastic mortuary art. The only hieroglyphics to be found within the pyramid are a few builders' marks sealed up in the chambers of construction, first opened by Howard Weiss. These apparently were painted upon the stones before they were set in position, for in a number of instances the marks were either inverted or disfigured by the operation of fitting the blocks together. While Egyptologists have attempted to identify the crude dabs of paint as cartouches of Cheops, it is almost inconceivable that this ambitious ruler would have permitted his royal name to suffer such indignities.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, first the statement of yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
Vivian wants to know, were you in the pyramid by yourself? And that is not the question I would have asked you. I would have asked you, were you admitting to bribing the guard so you could spend the night? But anyway, please answer Vivian's question.
$200 in 1990. It's probably higher now. And you have to, ask around until you finally get directed to the right guy who then knows all the guards. It's a whole little scene that they have. So I met the guard at the entrance to the pyramid, and and also meeting me there was a woman. And she also had paid for this privilege of spending the night in the pyramid. So we walked in, and my first reaction was absolute terror. Like, I really did think, who the hell do you think you are, to myself, right? What are you doing? Because the sense of the potency of the place, which is kind of diffused by the tourists during the day and by the daylight and all the lights in the pyramid, boy, that's gone. And you just feel intensity of the place. And so I entered, and I stood there really wondering if I should do this, like thinking maybe I'll back out. And then I looked at her and I said, "So what are you going to do?" And she had this deep Southern accent. She said, "Well, I'm just going to mosey on down to the Queen's chamber. I'll probably spend the whole night in there." And it was so unexpected that I felt, like I could handle it, right? So she went her way, I went my way. It was pitch dark. I climbed the Great Gallery and went into the King's Chamber and climbed into the sarcophagus and spent quite a while in there. Later, I went down to the subterranean chamber that we just looked at. I would add that sarcophagus, when you intone intone an ohm, that it lights up like a bell. I mean, literally, the sound becomes greater than your own voice, which I had never seen anything written about that. But it turns out that later in this dialogue, MPH mentions that. It makes me wonder how he knew that. Okay, so yeah, that's how that came down. That's the brief version. Anyone else?
Well, we have a couple of comments. They loved your story. I wonder if MPH found the same guard you did.
It would have been his dad or his grandfather. I went down in 90. MPH wrote this in 96. It would have been his grandfather.
But that was very fun. Thank you.
The guard had a bit, not the guard, but the guy that's sort of the guide that got you in. He had a business card, and on the business card was written, "Man of the Pyramid." Man of the Pyramid, and that was who you called if you wanted special access. Right? It all seems unreal to me now, many, many years later. Okay. All right, let me find my place here. Okay. So first, a statement about how unlike the Great Pyramid is from any other Egyptian edifice, especially of its time. As an example, here's a recent excavated tomb. I couldn't find the date, but it's like since I was in Egypt, which, according to modern archaeologists, is the same age as the Great Pyramid, meaning 4400 BC. It was discovered in Saqqara, which is a quick camel's ride from Giza. Yet, as you can see, stylistically, they bear no resemblance to each other at all, right? Bringing into question, the idea that they were built at the same time. Next, the only hieroglyphics to be found within the pyramid are a few builders' marks sealed up in the chamber of construction, first opened by Howard Weiss. These apparently were painted upon the stones before they were set in position, for in a number of instances, the marks were either inverted or disfigured by the operation of fitting the blocks together. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a photograph of these specific markings, but I did find a clay seal and an illustration of a cartouche found on the backing stone in the pyramid. Now, this clay seal could have been put there later, but this is actually a copy of a cartouche found, Khufu's cartouche, in fact, found on one of the backing stones of the pyramid. Howard Weiss, who discovered this stuff, rediscovered, and I say rediscovered because, they were known in ancient times, the 4 chambers above the king's chamber. This first chamber above this king's chamber was discovered much earlier, but then Howard Weiss discovered these higher four. And finally, while Egyptologists have attempted to identify the crude dabs of paint as cartouches of Cheops, it is almost inconceivable that this ambitious ruler would have permitted his royal name to suffer such indignities. Okay. You know, he makes a good point, but archaeologists have identified these markings as belonging to the era of Khufu. Though I personally believe the Great Pyramid was constructed millennia before the reign of Khufu, also known as Cheops, to my mind, calling these markings into question is not a particularly strong argument in support of this belief. In fact, it can't be denied that the existence of these markings remains an unsolved problem for those who date the Great Pyramid to an earlier epoch. If any of you have a theory as to how they could have got there, I would love to hear it. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Mary, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. As the most eminent authorities on the subject are still uncertain as to the true meaning of these crude markings, whatever proof they might be that the building was erected during the Fourth Dynasty is certainly offset by the seashells at the base of the pyramid, which Mr. Gabb advances as evidence that it was erected before the deluge, a theory substantiated by the much abused Arabian traditions. One Arabian historian declared that the pyramid was built by the Egyptian sages as a refuge against the flood, while another proclaimed it to have been the treasure house of the powerful antediluvian king Shaddad Benad. A panel of hieroglyphs over the entrance, which the casual observer might consider to afford a solution of the mystery, unfortunately dates back no further than AD 1843, having been cut at the time by Dr. Lipsius as a tribute to the King of Prussia.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, first, a statement weighing the evidence of the, quote, crude markings against the seashells found in the building stones of the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. 25 years after The Secret Teachings was written, the eminent Egyptologist Schwaller de Lubitsch speculated that the body of the Sphinx was eroded by deluges, and that therefore the Sphinx must belong to a much earlier era. In 1979, author John Anthony West, who, by the way, wrote this fabulous guidebook to Egypt, inspired by de Lubitsch's ideas, attributed the erosion to Nile floods between 15,000 and 10,000 BC, thus putting the time of the building in that time when predicted by Edgar Cayce. Could we get a reader for this, please? Actually, we're going to stop right here. This is a great place to start up again next time. So, well, thank you. That's quite a journey. We went through the last of the Vision of Pymander and a little review of the Atlantean materials, and then got well into this section on the pyramids. So I think we're right on par for our next dates. This will be the first Sunday in December. Is that right, BL?
Yes, the 4th of December at 8 p.m. GMT.
Great. So the next webinar will be on the secret doctrine, which will be in 2 weeks.
Right. 20 November at 8 p.m. GMT.
20th of November. Great. And then I haven't checked my calendar for.
Your Treatise of Cosmic Fire is on the 11th of November.
So because we had an early, is that right? How could that be?
Yeah, that's the second Friday.
Second Friday. Okay. Yeah, because we had a 3-week interval since
Right.
last.
Now let me ask you this about that, okay?
Sure.
You were doing that at 5 p.m. GMT, which would have changed to 6 p.m. GMT since we just changed clocks here in the US. But I think the announcement that came out from Tuya said that it would be at 8 p.m. GMT.
Well, that would be great, as far as I'm concerned, because that could allow a lot more people to attend. Problem with 5 p.m. is that all the people in the Southern Hemisphere, that's like very early in the morning. And so it's better at 8 p.m. But it's, as far as I'm concerned, completely up to you. I'm going to just show up at the published time. But she may have made a mistake. So maybe that needs to be
You may want to,
Yeah.
you may want to double check with her
Yeah.
and let her know that you're very happy with that time.
Yeah, with the later
Because
time.
that was an off time, really.
Uh-huh. 5.
But okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking about this coming Friday, so it needs to be dealt with right away. So that'll be the next TCF. So it's pretty much a webinar a week around here, even though sometimes they pile up and sometimes they stretch out if you're following all the series. Okay, thank you all. Thanks very much for showing up. I love this series, even though it's not directly connected with the DK material. It certainly does flesh out the esoteric subjects that are. So thank you, and I'll see you at the next webinar that you attend.
And someone who, I don't know, and Veronica reminded us that there's the pre-full moon webinar tomorrow.
That's right.
So there's a lot of full moon events that are going on right now. The sacred pentagram
Right.
at 6 p.m. and then the pre-full moon at 8 p.m. tomorrow. And then the exact full moon service at 9:15 a.m. on Tuesday. Sacred pentagram Wednesday, Thursday. So yeah, there's a lot going on this week because of the full moon activities. So
okay, thank you. I'm going to read the just hold up a bit. I want to read the chats before you close me down. But thank you all, and appreciate your attendance.
When's the next STOA?
Right on time, first Sunday of December, which is the 4th of December.
Gotcha.
All right, that's good.
okay, bye-bye. See y'all later.
Bye-bye.
And this one was really fun. I really enjoyed this one, especially your admissions and
yeah, that was another Francis Donald from another era. Okay, bye-bye.
bye.